Hello and welcome to this course. I wanted to quickly thank you for joining, along with giving you a quick overview on who I am, along with what this course is all about. So a little bit about me. My name is Sean Moore. I'm a cloud network architect currently, and I've created this course to simplify the journey that I wish I've had to get to this career that I'm in now. So over the years, I've been a network engineer in the network engineering space. I've helped many junior engineers, help desk techs, and career changers, just like yourselves, uh, go from where they are today to essentially where they want to be tomorrow. And really, I wanted to create a course that could help many others that's looking to do the same thing. This course is really meant for IT pros or junior engineers or anyone that's in the IT space that's looking to make a career change to being really in the world of cloud that we all hear about today. So there is a little bit of expectation that you are at least somewhat savvy with IT and what IT is and kind of what some of the terms are. But if not, this could still be helpful just to get a little bit of background on what this career is, because it is a little bit niche. So, this course is really a career blueprint. It's not just technical theory. I will not be going one by one on how to use and configure a cloud network constructs or build specific architectures, but I will tell you which ones are important, which network theories, which network concepts like load balancers or network architectures like multi-cloud that you need to be well aware of and how they work and what's underneath the hood and what makes them tick. But otherwise, this is really all about strategy. So this course is structured in short lessons. I will include templates along the way that will help you along with your journey. But these lessons are really meant to be actionable steps that you go through and then take action on and then come back and go to the next lesson. So it's really meant for that 30, 60, 90-day journey of getting you to where you are today to where you want to go tomorrow. So as I go along, my mentorship style, as you'll see throughout these courses, will really just be me kind of just talking through things. It'll be real talk. It won't really be anything that's too academic. Again, this isn't a technical theory type course. It's all about strategy. But I will make sure that you have everything you need to get to anywhere within this career space. So some things I want to highlight is that everything is in this course is based on real world experience and job market insight, whether that is things I've experienced or things other colleagues or friends have experienced along the way within this field. But it's everything that has happened and applied to the real world, not just based on textbooks. So again, this course is really meant to be taken based on actionable steps. Perfection is definitely not needed. You will reach stumbling blocks along the way, but I guarantee you, if you follow this lesson, all these lessons rather, this whole course, and go through the whole process, you will succeed. So again, thank you for joining, and yeah, let's jump right in. At the end of this course, I really want you to have everything you need to get that cloud network engineering or cloud network architect position that you're really after. So along the way, as I mentioned in the previous lesson, go through it step by step. Everything in here is actionable. I will teach you everything that you need to know along the way, everything that I've learned as well to get to where I am as a cloud network architect. So really commit to it, take it step by step, take action, and just follow the process, and you will 100% get to where you want to go in this career field. So this overview of this lesson is really just kind of to tell you what is expected of you and what I will provide to you. If there's anything you don't understand, you can also just reach out directly, write in the comments, and I will respond as quick as possible. But either that or just feel free to reach out to me directly for one-on-one sessions. But otherwise, everything you need is right here in this entire course. While this course is really meant for beginners and intermediate within the IT space, anyone can use this really that's interested in the world of cloud and everything cloud. So it's not just for network architects in cloud. It could be for security architects or database. It's all applicable the way I see it, and from others I've worked with along the way. Very similar journeys. The things I will tell you will be specifically related to all the networking side of things within cloud that you need to know. So again, I have some expectations that you already have at least IT experience, or even better, networking experience working for an enterprise or something along those lines. Follow along the lessons, take the steps, then move on to the next lessons. I will have templates, checklists, and other type of, again, things you can use, tasks to keep you on track along the way. But it's really all about jumping in and doing the work. So thank you. Let's get going. So what is a cloud network engineer? So a cloud network engineer is someone that is responsible for planning, designing, building, configuring the network constructs or network architecture within a cloud environment. So a lot of times you're not only responsible for ensuring that resources are deployed within its environment, which is typically virtual machines and databases, ensuring that those can communicate with each other, but you're also ensuring that those resources can securely and safely communicate outside of that environment as well. So a lot of times you'll be responsible for setting up direct connectivity to, say, your on-prem or to the outside world, like the internet. And it all needs to be done in a way that, again, is safe, but also performant, that scales, and is also highly available. That's a big important thing, usually within cloud environments. So that's the high level of what a cloud network engineer does. This role really, it bridges the gap between a network engineer, a traditional one, and the enterprise side of the fence with, say, a cloud architect. So not only are you worried about the typical things a network engineer would be worried about, such as packets getting from A to B, but you also need to know things about cloud native constructs as well, whether that's IAM policies or infrastructure as code or API calls. There's a lot of aspects of cloud that is very critical to know, kind of core concepts that you'll learn along the way, but will really make or break you as far as understanding how things are deployed as far as being a cloud network engineer. Because unlike being on the, say, the other side of the fence, being in-house at an enterprise, you're really not able to come up with, let's say, creative solutions sometimes when it comes to routing or when it comes to even switching. There really isn't a such thing as layer 2 switching in the cloud world. There's some exceptions to that, of course, but essentially you'll be dealing with certain design patterns, certain configuration routing patterns that you can't really break, or you can't really force a traffic to go a certain direction. You have to kind of learn how to build out your architecture so things can scale and, again, be secure, performant, and highly available. So some of the tasks you'll handle as a cloud network engineer will include designing virtual networks, building out CIDR blocks and ranges to support that. Again, setting up communications to other private networks, such as on-prem or sometimes even other cloud providers. That's a big thing now when it comes to cloud network architectures. There's a lot of multi-cloud because customers, they really want to have a footprint in all the clouds for various reasons, whether it's just for more disaster recovery or having the ability to use the best of breed of whatever that cloud offers. That's a lot of times while you'll see a customer or yourself as working for an enterprise environment have multiple cloud connections into an environment. And sometimes these clouds need to talk to each other and talk back to your on-prem and talk out to the internet as well to external clients. So that's very common to see that nowadays. Other things you'll be responsible for is typically load balancers. That's a big one. Firewalls, security rules, some of the more cloud native security constructs within any cloud provider. You'll also be responsible for ensuring that things such as zero trust between different resources available. Like a big thing is building out your infrastructure so that essentially one workload environment, say your production environment, cannot talk to your dev environment. That's a big thing usually when it comes to best practices. So with that said, network engineering is still a highly in-demand field. No, it's a very good place to be, but the world of cloud is also just as good, if not even more coveted nowadays by employers. And a big reason for that is just the massive amount of scale and also how quick you can move within the cloud world. So what can take days, weeks, months sometimes to build out when it comes to a network in the on-prem, you can do that within inside of an hour in a cloud environment. So you can move very fast within the cloud world. And also it kind of changes from a business perspective, really how you go about planning for these type of new projects or initiatives. Instead of having to get a bunch of money and have a bunch of capital at the start to build a project, you can kind of just build things as it comes and pay as you go. That way of thinking really accelerates businesses to really do things at a much faster pace than they could before by having infrastructure on-prem. So being a cloud network engineer is a very niche and unique position. So a lot of times we'll see that many people have either the skill set as a network engineer, and they've been doing that for a while, or they have many years of experience being a cloud architect, building those things. And the cloud architect will get their hands dirty with some of the network constructs because it's a must. The network is the first thing that needs to be laid. It's like a framework. You have to build out the network usually before you can deploy any type of resource. But a cloud architect will a lot of times build the bare bones to get the job done. They have good general knowledge of these network constructs, but that's not their day to day. Once the network is built, they typically move on and never come back to it. But you, as a cloud network engineer, you have the opportunity to really be a specialized asset for any company, really, by having knowledge about not only the particular product or services within the cloud when it comes to networking, but also the architectures and how to do things best practice and bring out even new ideas that, a lot of times like cloud architect will not have the time to really dive into. So it's a great place to be. It's a very unique field, very cool, it's cutting edge. And in the next lessons, we're going to really dive into more of the tools and things you'll be using throughout your day to day. So let's join that lesson now. So in this lesson, we're going to cover the key skills and tools you'll need to be successful in your journey. And as you step into that cloud network engineer or architect role, a core component really of being a cloud network engineer is understanding essentially all the cloud constructs and cloud infrastructure and the pieces that makes it a whole. More than network engineering, believe it or not. The network engineering pieces, it's great if you already have that network engineering experience. They'll cover all the things when it comes to routing, IP addressing, general networking discussions when we get into like load balancers or anything that involves setting up those really A to B type connection points. But for the most part, those can be learned along the way if you don't have that today, mainly because, and you'll see this in many cloud environments, you just do not have the same robustness when it comes to networking features. So a lot of times you had to design around that or implement workaround solutions or avoid it altogether or bring your own solution to the cloud. But you'll learn quickly Like, for example, that with routing, any cloud provider, the major three or four, you only have two options at your hand when it comes to routing. You have static routing and you have BGP. That's it. There's no OSPF, EIGRP, no RIP, of course. But really, the hardest part is understanding the limitations and how to build around that. Having a strong network engineering background is for sure helpful, but it isn't the end all be all for this particular role. Learning and knowing about essentially cloud architecture and cloud constructs is way more helpful when it comes to that. Some things that will be important when it comes to networking side of things in cloud will be really having a deep understanding of the virtual networks and how those are built out and connect to each other. Honestly, it's pretty straightforward. Again, if you already come from a network engineering background, it'll come very quickly to you. It's essentially like having your own remote site with subnets in it, just as you would any other new build for a new location. Some of the other things that you may not see a lot of in your current network engineering job role is other constructs such as DNS. DNS is a very big one. And when it comes to cloud computing, and we'll talk more about that, but essentially, without these different environments having a very robust and thought out DNS architecture, that can lead to a lot of issues along the way. Same thing with load balancers is another big one. That's another one that's kind of hit or miss. A lot of times, load balancers and even DNS falls under like a system admin type role, not a network administrator, engineer type role. Don't worry, you don't have to become guru on any of these, but having a solid understanding will be useful. So the best way that you're going to really be ready for this role is going to be getting any hands-on experience you could get your hands on. I mentioned this in my earlier lessons. What's nice about the cloud is that you can move very quick, very easily. And a lot of times you can move it at and build things at very low cost or a lot of times really for free. The hardest part is really coming up with the ideas and coming up with ways to implement it. You can do things like set cost limits and budgets with any of these cloud providers so you don't go over that budget. Like for myself, my own cloud environment, I have some home labs, like for AWS, where I have a limit where if it goes over $8 a month, it sends me a notification that I spent too much for the things I've been doing. So that gives you kind of a sense on how cheap things can be compared to, again, like the CCNA lab back in the day where you had to buy, use routers, use switches, cabling, a rack, a lot of times power, connect all those things together, console cables, get out that all working. And by the time you do all that, just the money, which at that time was hundreds of dollars for sometimes just a router, a used one, very used one, and time, which would be many hours just to get everything plugged in and working right, and a high electric bill. Compared to that, just being able to log into a cloud console and being able to jump right in and build things for cheap makes all the difference in the world. So you can get a lot of hands-on experience and ramp up fairly quickly with everything you need to know. When it comes to other things you'll need to know is essentially the cloud providers that are out there. There are many, there's dozens. Some are bigger than others, obviously. I'll tell you that essentially in my world, there's four that if you really focus on any one of those, you'll be good to go anywhere else. So at the top, you have AWS. At the moment, the time of this video creation, that's not really debatable. They're the biggest. From there, you have Microsoft Azure, pretty sizable as well. And then below that, you have Google. They have their cloud. And you also have Oracle's OCI as well. And what you'll see as you start learning any of these different cloud providers in their environment is a lot of the constructs are really the same. A lot of the designs and how you implement them usually similar. That's where honestly the biggest differences are is essentially how you implement things. Each cloud has their own way of doing things a bit, and sometimes there are limitations, or you can actually do a lot more than you can with another cloud provider. But otherwise, if you learn one way of doing it with one cloud provider, you're really set to go. You can learn the other environments, other cloud environments, competitors very quickly, very easily to ramp up as needed. Don't feel like you had to learn every nuance of every different cloud provider and how they do things when it comes to network constructs and building out network architectures. Just find one that you like, kind of focus on that, learn all the constructs there, take their IT certification tests, because essentially about all of these cloud providers have some type of network certification at this point. I will tell you right now that it is usually pretty tough. It's usually one of the tougher exams, but if you can get through their certifications, you will be in the top 10% easily as far as knowledge when it comes to cloud network engineering. But that's the quick tip on how to move ahead of everyone else here. Some other things that will be essential as far as tools go will be learning about infrastructure as code and a little bit of DevOps. Not saying that you have to be hands-on as far as creating your own DevOps pipeline with a GitHub, CI type constructs or anything like that, or even Terraform, but knowing what they are, how they work, what they do, how most likely the other people that are using your cloud environment is taking advantage of that cloud space, APIs, IAM. Um, these are all acronyms, but these are things that you'll need to at least have a very high level understanding of what they are and what these tools do. A lot of times, you'll see all of these things used together, especially when it comes to infrastructure as code, because essentially this automation, again, because the cloud, you can move very fast rather than going in and clicking through one by one and building all the resources and constructs you need. You can automate all of this. And you can also build out templates with like Terraform and Ansible to make your life a lot easier and not only build things out, but have a playbook. And that's also going to be your one source of documentation. It does a lot of things for you that you don't really get by just going in and clicking around on things, which for this course, clicking around on things is perfectly fine. I'm not expecting you, and most employers do not expect you to have a very deep level understanding of infrastructure as code for the cloud network engineering architecture roles, but having a good sense of what it does and why you would want to use it and how you could potentially use uh, infrastructure as code to automate the network side of things, because you absolutely can with any cloud provider, the major ones at least. Everything is an API. With everything being an API, everything can be coded in some form or fashion. So, very good thing to know. I haven't talked about this a lot, but security concepts will be another big portion of the tools and skills we need to learn. Again, with all these cloud providers, they all have their own ways of doing things, but they usually have the same type of network constructs available, and security being one of those. You'll come across what they call either security rule lists or ACLs or something along those lines, where essentially you're creating access and deny lists where you're denying or allowing traffic based on IP address, IPTP, UDP port, and protocol. And some will allow you to create deny rules and allow rules. Some will only allow you to create allow rules. These are just some of the differences between the cloud providers, but that's important to know. Even more important to know is essentially firewall. A lot of cloud providers back in the day, they didn't have this as much, but a lot of cloud providers have their own next gen firewall that does what we call a deep packet inspection, where traffic is coming in to a dedicated firewall. And that firewall is doing more than just allowing or denying traffic. It's actually looking inside that data from workloads, learning about not only their firewalls, but the ability to deploy third-party firewalls from different vendors like Cisco or Palo Alto, Fortinet. You don't need to know the details on the nuances between the firewall, so kind of understanding how they play a picture within a cloud network environment. How would you go about deploying it? Where would it sit in the cloud network environment? How do you best scale this out and ensure performance and reliability with these firewalls? These are all things that you'll want to at least do some white paper researches on. The firewalls can be pretty pricey. So this is one of the things that if you are doing hands-on labs, this is something you could probably skimp out on, most likely, but just have a good idea on what that architecture looks like, because that will be a big piece of many cloud environments. Is a true firewall of some form or fashion. Outside of that, the other key skills and tools you'll need is anything that you would kind of use in your current role or any other IT role. Documentation skill and diagramming skills, that's important. To me, what's nice is it's pretty straightforward when it comes to the type of architectures that you're going to see. Again, the cloud world that you live in usually have some type of limitations. They have boxes, for better or worse, on what you can design and what things you can do. After you start seeing a few different network architectures, you'll start to get a sense of the pattern, the same patterns, some bigger, some smaller, but essentially you can quickly get a sense of what's available with the network design itself and how things can communicate with each other, and essentially what isn't possible as well. That's something you'll pick up along the way. A lot of the cloud providers have their own built-in tools, so you kind of can see how things are connected together, like OCI, Oracle's cloud infrastructure. You can actually go right into the console, and there's a special area called Network Visualizer where you can see a diagram of the network that you built out, whether it's hand by hand or do infrastructure as code. It's right there for you. That's another important tool, but you're most likely doing stuff like this today if you're like a network engineer on the enterprise side of the fence. With that said, you don't have to master everything at once. A lot of things change fast in the world of cloud, that what you do today will not be the same tomorrow. I remember many years ago in Amazon AWS, where they didn't have such things as like a transit gateway or a way to scale out what they call their VPCs or their virtual network. It wasn't a real easy way to connect those together and scale that out or create like a hub and spoke VPC design. Cloud natively, you actually had to deploy your own third party VPN solution in a VPC and call that your hub and use that as a transit to connect to other spoke VPC. Today, that role is entirely different. Knowing the core details, which I'll go over a little bit more as we go through these lessons on which network things to learn and what not to really worry about. I did mention some in this lesson. You'll pick those up along the way. And as you start to go down in your journey as a cloud network engineer, you'll start to learn what really isn't as important to spend much time on and what is. But it all depends on your role, where you work, your cloud provider. But don't feel like you have to be a master at everything. Just the core cloud networking functionality is what you need. Let's talk about job titles, potential compensation, and overall job roles. So generally, this type of role will always have like cloud somewhere in the title. Not always, but usually. So something like cloud network engineer or cloud network architect, the two titles I've been talking about so far throughout this course. But it can also include titles such as solution architect or cloud solution engineer. But generally, it's something that's along the lines of what you'll be doing from day to day. Now, speaking of day to day, that can also vary. Even though your title may be cloud network engineer, you may be less hands-on, more really designing, planning, architecting, or the exact opposite. You can have cloud network solutions architect and spend a lot of your time configuring objects or resources or troubleshooting with a little bit of light touch of actual architecting. So it really depends mostly on the employer of what the title and role will be. And that's some key points as you go through and look for some of these job roles. Ensure it's exactly aligned, at least the core requirements are aligned with what you're looking for, because that can make all the difference in the world of you really being happy in that role or not. And what I would hate is for you to move into this field and not like what you're doing. With that said, the salary ranges are all across the board, but generally you can expect to be somewhere over that typical $100,000 range, if I'm being completely honest. If you're not there, it must be possibly a more junior role. something as like an analyst, something along those lines, where maybe you have someone more senior you'll be working alongside with. But typically, the cloud space really offers a lot of six-figure type salaries, and that's what you should go in expecting. If I'm honest with you, again, that will ensure that your roles and responsibilities will again align with your expectations as well. That, in my opinion, should be the goal. If you're not there already, is to ensure that not only that the title, but also the expected total compensation, which can be a mix of things. A lot of times it's salary, that's always typical, usually can be hourly, but usually salary. A lot of times it could be bonus or even stocks, or depending on your role. If you're more sales facing, it could be commissions as well. It could be a combination of all four, maybe even some others I'm not thinking of at the moment. These roles will all be in a six-figure plus landscape, and that's what you really should shoot for. I think the effort you put in makes that compensation worthwhile and what you're worth as well. As far as the industries for this type of role, you're most likely going to be somewhere probably in healthcare, finance, maybe working for a vendor that helps other customers move into the cloud, or the cloud provider themselves. It could be telecom, it could be all over the place, really. But typically, these are large companies that are well past the landscape of a small footprint of some network routers and the switches. Usually, these companies are, if they're not growing rapidly, they have infrastructure requirements that are very large, and they're making a decision to either stay on-prem or go to a hybrid approach of both, or getting out of on-prem and going to a strictly virtual cloud presence with their infrastructure. And these companies will be very large in size, meaning 1,000 employees plus, anywhere to 100,000 employees plus. That's where you'll really see a lot of these more niche roles like cloud network architect, different levels of a cloud network architect, senior, principal, etc. These will be very large enterprises that you're working for or working with. The number one question that I get is, how do I get into this position? And that's obviously why you joined this course. And where do I need to be to get there? So I mentioned earlier that you're already in a network type position, whether that's a network engineering type role or something very similar. That makes the jump a lot easier in certain ways not, because there's a lot of things you have to unlearn. Other times there are cases where I've worked with individuals that's already in the cloud space, but maybe they're more general architect or engineer, and they want to do something more specific that can provide additional value in a few different ways. But there's also others that's either, just at the very beginning of their career in IT, like in a help desk role. And in those cases, there will be some steps typically you'll need to go from a support help desk type role directly to an engineer role. There can sometimes be a gap you need to overcome. And this is where IT certifications can help a lot here, and along with the hands-on labs. Also, taking on potential projects that may exist with your current employer that no one else wants to take on. But a lot of times you'll want to at least be on a path that can let you take it step by step. This isn't really something you can jump into with one career move, just depending on where you're at. You may take a couple of career hops to get there. You may have to go from that help desk role to maybe a support engineering type role, or systems engineering or network engineer. And then from there, make that final leap to cloud completely. So it just depends. And this is where you want to really start mapping out your goals, your plans, where you are today. Take a hard look on what you know, what you don't know, and start making a list on what you need or what you think you need to kind of knock out to get ready to move into this role. I will say that, along the way, maybe you're not making that six-figure salary today, but as you make these either leapfrog jumps or just small little jumps, your salary will increase along the way. So you'll hopefully making more income as you work through this journey as well. So you're not just maybe making what you really don't want to make today, and then working so hard to try to make that huge, large leap to a cloud network architect position. You can for sure take steps by steps. That's what I did to get to where I am today. Before I was even a network engineer, I was a network operations specialist, checking if the network was up or down. And before that, I was in my computer help desk support type roles. That's been my journey. And it'll most likely be the journey for you as well, unless, as I mentioned, you're already kind of in a network engineering position or a network architect, and it's really just more of a lateral type move on filling in those little bit of gaps of knowledge from the enterprise side of the house to being that's more cloud native. The last thing I want to touch on is it's not just about experience, it's not just about the certs you have. I work with many individuals that do not have any certs or any type of college degree at all. They just have experience, which is obviously always, the number one thing you want to have is experience. But also, I've worked with other individuals that were able to really speed up the process by doing things outside of just their general job duties, meaning they built their own personal lab, which we'll talk through in other lessons, or they built their own ideas and presented them to their employer or just to others for free, whether that's on LinkedIn or their own personal website, on how to create these infrastructures that maybe is cloud related, maybe it's not, but something that kind of showcases your skill set, your willingness to learn, your willingness to grow, and really your passion for what it is you're doing. So if you combine all those things, those projects, having the strategy map that we're doing here with goal setting, where you are today and where you want to go, getting those certs. If you don't have certain certs, that will for sure be helpful. The degree, yes or no, it just depends. I say it's not as necessary to have a particular degree, but it is always good to have if you do have it, but it's not as important. Experience and really applying for those right roles that make the right fit for what you're looking for. Mix of all those things, some more, some less, all depends on you as well. But combining all those things will make all the difference in the world for moving into this role. So in this lesson, I want to cover IT certifications and not just certifications as a whole, to understand which certifications matter and which ones don't, which ones are really just noise and won't really do much for where we're trying to go. So essentially, certifications are a great way to focus your efforts on learning certain technologies. We'll have individuals really dive into certifications as a way to jumpstart their career. And there's some assumptions that can be made that if I get this certification just as one, my whole life will change. And unfortunately, that's usually not the case. But certifications help a lot in understanding core concepts and understanding certain technologies and how they're implemented and what's underneath the hood for whatever that particular course is about. In my journey, I've focused honestly on a lot of certifications, some better, some worse, but I focus on certifications on technologies that help me in my day-to-day job or on the next step in my career journey. Going in knowing that once I pass this cert, I may not be able to even use what I've learned for that particular cert anytime in the near future, but somewhere along the way, it will help me out. And what this does also with certifications is gives you a framework to work off of as far as learning new technologies. Some people don't like that approach. Some people like to really just be more of a learn as they go type of way of learning and gaining new skills, which is perfectly fine. But for me, I found IT serves to be the game changer on really giving me that direction and focus on going from that network engineering position to the cloud network engineering architect position role that I have today. And I'll give you an example of that. So early on in my career, I focused on the CompTIA A+ and Network Plus certs. And the reason I started there was one, they are definitely the foundational level of cert. It gave me an idea on how to go through the whole certification process, learning what material to find, buy, read through, how to actually learn for a cert, because there are methods to the madness in that, which I'll talk about in a bit. Going through the first initial certs helped me get a good idea on what it looked like to go from learning about a technology and a cert and passing a test, and just going to sit down and book and pass the test is its own thing as well. So that's how I got my start when I first was in my early days of my IT career, when I was in like a help desk type role, but wanted to learn more about some of the things and topics I was hearing back in those days, which is everything from like Windows servers to DHCP. I heard those terms, but really didn't understand how those worked at a high level. So that helped me out a lot. but it didn't necessarily give me that network engineering job right away. What did help was taking those few things that I did learn along the way and applying them to my current role, and then taking that and using those new skills during my next job search. So when I went from the help desk tech to a doc engineer, it helped knowing those fundamentals about TCP and UDP, for example, that I got from the Network Plus. And then once I was in that NOC engineering role, I used that time to really ramp up my network knowledge. So that's when I started to go for my Cisco CCNA at that time. And the CCNA was great as far as fundamentals on network engineering. It is vendor focused on the Cisco product lines, but it's a very useful baseline, if you will, for anything that's network engineering. And I think many others would agree. But the CCNA did not get me my network engineering role. As a matter of fact, what helped me was jumping to another job that was a voice over IP focus. And in that role, I gained a lot of experience on specifically like SIP, which is a voice over IP technology, Cisco Call Manager, which was Cisco's VoIP product services for VoIP phones. And from there, I took that role to eventually finally step up into a job that was network engineering based with a VoIP focus. And once I had that job, I used that IT certification roadmap. In this case, I knew I had my CCNA. I used that as a springboard to focus on those higher level professional certs. So at that time, I started to look at the Cisco professional certification to really round off my network engineering knowledge and to learn more about the more complex topics such as BGP, which was very helpful. And as I rounded out all those different certifications, I had quite a few under my belt at that time. I think I had a few Microsoft ones also. I started to learn exactly which certs made sense. Whenever I had started a new job, I always tried to find a cert that was one available for the particular technology I was learning at the time. So at one point, I was learning about the Juniper product line, which is a Cisco competitor when it comes to network routers and switches. So I went for the Juniper certs, and that was very helpful just for my job at that standpoint. And I kind of ignored some of the other ones. So there was like load balancer certs like the F5, which was a very useful product. It's still very useful, very feature rich load balancer. But I learned the technology for the cert, but I didn't take the test because I knew, for one, that really wasn't the direction I wanted to go in. I didn't want to be a load balancing specialist, but I did want to learn the technology. And two, not many employers were really asking for an F5 specific engineer. But they're out there. There's for sure some roles, but in a broader sense, there wasn't a whole lot out there. So I didn't take that cert. So you can kind of see how I use certs to help me along the way, really just a boost in my career as far as leveling up, but also in learning about my current career and where I want to go next. And so I say that to say that when it came to learning about anything that was cloud related. At the time, Amazon AWS was really the only main player in town. The cloud architect exam is really where I focused my expertise on and learning, even though I was not touching cloud at all. I went ahead and started digging into that certification program. And by grabbing that certification and letting my employer know that I passed that certification, they realized, hey, we needed someone, matter of fact, to actually take a look at this new thing they call cloud. And you seem to be the most knowledgeable because you're the only one with the cert. So that was how I started to slowly get my foot into the world of cloud as a network engineer. So the cloud architect exam is very broad, but it is one I consider a core certification that anyone that's looking to be a cloud network engineer should take. Again, whether that's the AWS version or Azure, Microsoft version, or Oracle's or Google's, they all have some type of cloud architect exam. And I would highly recommend that if you were to take any certifications, if you were to skip the network engineering ones for like Cisco, that's fine. I recommend the CCNA at minimum, but you can probably get away with skipping that. If you're not going to do any of the network certifications, to at bare minimum, take a hard look at a cloud architect type cert. Now, I gave you my journey as far as my career and some of the certifications I've taken because you're going to use that as a roadmap on where you want to go. You're essentially going to plan backwards, and it may not make sense, but essentially start from the dream job that you want. Say it's a cloud network architect. What that position looks like, what that title involves, and essentially take that title and go and do a job search, whether that's on LinkedIn or Indeed, and see what those job requirements are. And on there, most likely, well, I guarantee it, they're going to have an education field where you can see one, the type of degree that may be required. And usually they'll mention in lieu of degree, they recommend you have either this amount of experience or these particular certifications. Now, these certifications are the one you want to identify. A lot of times they will be the professional level certs, but with professional level certs, there's usually also associate level fundamental certs. So learning what that job holds and the certification they look for, you can kind of map backwards where you need to start. You're not going to start with the professional level cert, but you may start with that fundamental or associate version of the cert. So in this lesson, I want to give you my recommendation for an IT certification roadmap. So starting from the beginning, if you're not network savvy or you do not have experience as a network engineer, I would start with the CompTIA Network Plus. And then from there, move to the CCNA, the Cisco CCNA. You can skip the Network Plus and go right into the CCNA. That will save you some time, but there will be a bit of a learning curve, most likely, jumping right into Cisco level type exam. The CCNA is more associate rather than fundamental, but it's a good place to start if you want to kind of just get right into it. And from there, before jumping into anything else that's network related, I would go and tackle a cloud architect associate level exam. Again, it can be from any of the major cloud providers, Azure, AWS, Oracle, or Google. I like AWS, Amazon's certification track, is because it's been around the longest. And if I'm honest, they have the most feature set out of all the cloud providers. So you'll be learning things that's either not done yet in other cloud providers or not available, or you'll also learn a bit more in depth about certain technologies and network constructs even that may exist in other cloud providers, but not as feature rich, if you will. This will take some time. So this is probably easily 60 days or so right there. If you start today and you're working day by day to knock both of those out, possibly longer. It could be 3 to 6 months. The purpose is to really understand all of these different types of skills and have a really good grasp and really set a very strong foundation. So what you're doing now will be the longest part of this journey. Knock out these certs if you don't have them already, and then continue on to the next steps, which is essentially just resume building and rounding out your portfolio so you can start hitting the ground running with reaching out to employers. After these 2 certs, the next cert, and this will be something that you don't want to take lightly, but I highly recommend it, and it will be tough. It will be a bit difficult. I recommend going after the AWS network specialty exam. Now, a lot of people will not recommend this unless you have many years of experience under your belt. But I will say from personal experience that it is possible. Cloud is a virtual world and you have access to all the tools, all the documentation at your fingertips, right at your computer. But this exam is one of the most tough AWS exams out there. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but if you could get through this, or at the bare minimum, go through all the material, go through the practice tests, and really at least understand the majority of what the certification is about and how it works, you will be in the top 10% as far as networking knowledge in the cloud world. You will surpass many others based on this one certification alone and can be seen even as an expert by this point, just by the sheer amount of effort and detail that will be needed to get through this exam. So this is my last recommendation. If you get these 3 certs, as far as rounding off your technical skill set, this is it. Besides the labs you'll be doing, which you should be doing anyways if you're going through these certification tracks, rounding off these 3 exams, which would be my personal recommendation. You can skip everything else. You can skip the Cisco CCNP, definitely CCIE. You can skip any of those other cloud exams and certifications, like anything that's like database related or DevOps related. You can skip all of that for now. These 3 will get you to A to Z for sure as far as being ready from a technical standpoint to take on a cloud network engineering role at bare minimum. From this point forward, I would really expect you to be essentially heads down in actionable work to get to where you want to go as far as being a cloud network engineer or architect. That means you've most likely completed the lesson before this, where I've covered essentially a high level certification roadmap, and you've identified one, or at bare minimum, understand what some of those objectives are from that certification that you need to pick up on. At this level, and then the rest of this lesson and this section and the rest of the course, really want to be doing the work. The next two lessons, I'm going to strictly focus on the network constructs, the things that the many different cloud providers all use for the most part when it comes to building out networks in the cloud. So this lesson, I'm going to talk about what most of those constructs are and how they essentially apply across all the major cloud providers. And then in the next lesson, I'm going to go over the different architectures based on these different network constructs. Okay, so to start, the first major network construct we're going to talk about is the virtual network. Every cloud provider, this is across the board, all have their own name for this construct. But this is essentially the framework. This is the actual network you're going to lay down to deploy your resources. Within all of these virtual networks, there's going to be a few different concepts that will exist inside of it. So one will typically be a subnet. So essentially, virtual network will have what's called an IP network block or CIDR range, where you'll use to assign IP addresses to things. But more than that, you'll carve it out into subnets. So that means you're breaking up this network into smaller networks. And within these subnets, this is where they'll make use of things such as the virtual network's DHCP service or DNS service as well. For these different subnets, they will typically make use always of some type of gateway or multiple gateways. And the purpose of the gateways is to allow communication typically outside of the virtual network itself. So when you're deploying resources such as virtual machines within the virtual network, these virtual machines usually have the ability to directly route and communicate between each other, but not outside of the virtual network itself. So that's where the gateways come into place. So a little more on gateways, there's multiple types, but you'll typically at least find these three. But you have what's called like an internet gateway. So just like the name applies, this gateway allows these resources to connect out to the internet. So you want to really understand how this works and any limitations on and how you deploy it. Alongside of that, you have something typically called a NAT gateway, network address translation gateway. And this usually acts as a many-to-one type of communication, to where you have your resources within your virtual network that you don't want to have external parties on the outside to be able to connect directly to it, but you want to have the ability for these private resources to have the ability to make outbound connections for things such as like software updates or maybe just browsing on the internet. But typically, you don't want these publicly exposed directly. And this is where a NAT gateway will come into play. The third type of gateway you'll typically see is a gateway construct to connect your virtual network to other virtual networks. This can come in the form of some type of direct peering between the virtual networks, but a lot of times you have some type of gateway, such as AWS Transit Gateway or Oracle's Dynamic Routing Gateway, that allows this to scale a lot further. This is where you start to get into some of the architecture designs. But this gateway allows you to scale out to many virtual networks and allow them all to communicate between each other in a mesh or a hub and spoke type technology or architecture, and also connect to other private networks as well. So this is where you start to get into some of those hybrid cloud designs where you're using your gateways to connect to on-premise environments or out to even other cloud providers. Something else that's very important to know that you will come across is, I mentioned that you'll use some type of gateway to connect to your on-prem or to another cloud provider. But exactly how do you do that? You need some type of circuit between them. And this is where you'll start learning about IPsec VPNs. That's a very common one because usually it's cheap, fast, and usually easy to set up to allow private and encrypted communications between your cloud environment and somewhere else. Again, that could be on-prem, it could be another cloud, it could even be the same cloud sometimes. But this is one you'll want to really dig into, and this is one you should at least practice in a cloud environment because typically these IPsec VPNs are free to set up. If there's nothing cloud native, which I know all the major cloud providers have their own cloud native VPN service, you can also essentially roll your own. There's a lot of free VPN services out there, like OpenVPN, you can deploy within a cloud. And for free, you can set up one or two of the site to site VPN connections. So, VPNs in general, you want to dig into, understand the different phases of how a general IPsec VPN is stood up, the type of routing that you can do with those, how do you make it highly available, things of that nature. So, definitely get your hands on VPNs and play with that. Another one alongside of that when it comes to circuits is essentially the direct circuits between a on-prem cloud provider or again cloud to cloud type communication. You'll see a direct type of circuit connection with some type of fiber with virtual circuits. They all have their different names depending on the cloud provider, of course, like everything else. Like for example, Azure has something called Express Route. Oracle's OCI has Fast Connect. AWS has Direct Connect. They all more or less function the same. They allow much more performant connectivity between private networks or other private networks. So a VPN is just going to go over the internet, and it's usually best effort between point A to point B. Whereas with these direct connections, you can specify specific bandwidth and also have SLAs against that, ensure that your on-prem has a dedicated 1 gig to your cloud environment. And that's very important for businesses. Typically, it's some type of SLA. So VPNs are good for backup in case the main direct connection fails, or just for POCs or testing. But really, most enterprises are going to look for some type of true dedicated circuit. And this is where you'll want to at least understand the different technologies and how those work. At the time of this course, as far as routing, getting traffic from point A to point B, BGP is the only option. That may change in the future. That's just how fast cloud moves. But essentially, you want to have a good understanding of the routing protocol, BGP. If there's no other routing protocol you want to focus on or deal with, at bare minimum, you want to understand the border gateway protocol. Last but not least is security, network security. So within any of these major cloud providers, network security will be a big thing that falls on your shoulders. And some things to know out of the box is that every cloud provider will have a cloud native access list control of some type for every virtual network. So this means that there's usually some type of security list method or ACL that you can use to either allow particular traffic based on IP address or TCP UDP port protocol, or deny access as well. Now, some of these cloud providers do not have a way to control both deny and allow. It's just really dependent on the cloud provider, but there's always some way to allow traffic in or out. And there's some important concepts to understand with that, because these virtual networks aren't like your typical enterprise network. There are some things that work inherently different than on the enterprise side of the house. So for example, if you're deploying the same workloads in the same virtual network subnet, by default, a lot of times these two different workloads can't directly communicate, even though they're in the same exact subnet. Understanding that line of thinking of how essentially a zero trust network works on the side of cloud and what you need to do to make that work is very important. Just having a clear understanding of access lists. And again, this is something you can play with in your cloud lab. Allowing traffic in or denying traffic in or out, allowing specific traffic to go to a specific place is very important. So on top of that, many cloud providers offer their own network firewall service. So this goes a step further than your typical access list. Instead of putting up like a wall to allow traffic in or out, it's actually coming in, and if it's being allowed, doing some type of deep packet inspection where it's, looking inside and seeing what's going on with this traffic. Is it truly a safe piece of data to send on to my client, or is there something malicious going on? And this is where a network firewall can help. They can do all sorts of fancy things, a lot more so than your typical access list. It can block based on the latest signatures that's been released by certain security organizations, things of that nature. To do this in your home environment can be very expensive and pricey. There are some nice open source firewall products out there that can be worth playing around with. But understanding really more of the architecture on how you would deploy a network firewall is a little bit more important than understand the exact policies to implement or how to implement. Usually you can learn that as you go, because different businesses have different security requirements. They have things that typically is based on the industry they're in or the size of the company or the culture. So it can really vary on what you'll really do with a network firewall. But just understanding how that plays a piece in the cloud network is very important. All right, in this lesson, we're going to continue our discussion on the technical side of things, focus now on the architecture that supports these network constructs. We went through kind of the core network to know and understand, but how do these all get deployed so they can support the resources that are applied and used in the cloud world? This understanding that the network architecture or design in your environment should do a matter of things. The first one is it should be secure. That's on top of that, it should be performant, meaning that the resources are able to take advantage of that network to get the job done as quick as they possibly can in the best manner possible. It should be very resilient, highly available, and reliable. A lot of cloud providers can solve for you with any of the cloud native services. They're always resilient in some form or fashion, some type of high availability baked in. This is really due to the way these data centers are designed. So you use a concept called regions, and these regions are located geographically across the globe. So you can place resources in these many different regions. And within inside these regions, they typically have multiple data centers. It could be something called a availability zone or availability domain to provide yet another layer of high availability. Understand how you can scale your network architecture. So it doesn't really make sense to just plot things on a cloud environment and then start connecting them in any form or fashion, because what you'll quickly see is that if you don't run into limitations on eventually connecting one resource to another, say from one virtual network to another virtual network, you'll run into design patterns where you have a snowflake of an environment that doesn't really make sense to anyone unless you're digging into the routing tables or the security lists, or it can quickly become a headache if you don't use some type of design pattern. So honestly, there are some best practices that you can stick to, and that will kind of serve you for most of your cloud network design purposes. So starting with the bare bones, what you will typically see is what we call a tier layer design. By tier, we mean the different layers of, say, a web service or application service that needs to talk to a backend database service. Either a 2-tier where there's just an application to the database, or a 3-tier where there's maybe a web front end, then there's the application sandwiched in the middle, and then a database. But in these 3 cases, or 2 cases, these workloads they're segmented from each other, meaning they're either in different virtual networks or bare minimum different subnets. They have different security rules, security lists. They may even have a load balancer in front of them on top of that. So that's yet another tier to help kind of proxy and help service client traffic to those different workloads. And with this design, you can really get a sense on thinking about best practices with what I mentioned earlier regarding scalability, performance, high availability, and even management. So from there, we have some other design patterns, such as a hub and spoke design. Your hub will be the entry point for traffic coming in and out of your cloud environment. And this hub will include things such as your network firewall, or maybe your load balancers, especially if they're public facing. So you'll have all data flows in and out, what we call north-south. So like the internet coming in to your private networks, or east-west, meaning between virtual networks. We usually call this your spoke virtual networks. All traffic will come through in and out of this central location. So this is a very common design pattern that you'll want to understand and remember for your interviews and in the real world as well. From there, you can scale out even further. So we're thinking about still in the cloud space, DR, disaster recovery. So high availability helps because it's no real impact to the end user. Worst case, maybe they have to reestablish their session to the web service or whatever's running, but there's no noticeable impact. Disaster recovery is a step further to where something, hence the name, disaster happens, maybe in that region or data center, and there's really no way to recover. So all your machines in this use case are down, and you need some type of backup plan or disaster recovery to bring that back up, maybe in a different region. Understanding that architecture and how that works within a cloud environment, cloud providers will allow you to make use of what they call their network backbone. So you can establish connections between those different regions I mentioned earlier to allow for one region to go down and have the ability to fail over to your other region. Now, this is where you'll need to work directly with the business and understand things such as RTO and RPO correlated to how much data you can lose and for how long and we need to get it up by. And in some cases, there can be some high requirements where things, even in a disaster, a whole region is gone. You need the ability to be up within minutes, not seconds. And there's some cases where the customer is okay with being down for 12 plus hours, and you just need to really just have a plan on how to spin up those devices in the new region. Having a clear picture on what that is and what that looks like is very important. You'll learn some of those things in some of the cloud architect courses that you take. Hopefully you're looking at some of those certifications, but if not, there's many white papers on this, and you should for sure dig through them because this will also be a question that will come up on those interview exams. Outside of the cloud space, there's some other architectures to be aware of, starting with what's known as a hybrid. Enterprise do not want to fully commit to just being cloud only. Let's have an arm into the cloud space for certain services, maybe tired of dealing with their databases. So they'll move that footprint to the cloud, but keep everything else like their applications on-prem. So in that case, you'll make use of those direct connections I mentioned earlier. You'll still need things such as your virtual networks to host the databases and understand how you're going to use BGP routing to make that connectivity between on-prem and cloud possible. The last type of architecture I want to touch on, and this is something we're starting to see a lot more of, is multi-cloud architecture. So what's multi-cloud? That's really what the name implies. It's multiple clouds that are interconnected with each other. There's many various ways to do this, some cheaper than others. You can take advantage of the cloud native services available within the cloud provider to connect to another cloud. There's many partnerships between them like Azure and OCI. Right from their consoles, connect to each other without having to worry about getting any type of middleman circuit provider to help stand up these type of connections. So just having a clear sense of what this looks like and why you want to do this. For example, enterprise might like a certain application service that cloud provider provides, but they like the database service that another cloud provider provides. So they want to use the best of both services. So they'll build the apps in one cloud and then connect those apps back to a database in the other cloud. And it's good to understand why this is done, along with just the how. Cloud providers all have a free tier where essentially you can deploy services either in a smaller capacity or use a limited amount of availability of that service, all for free. That's typically enough for everything you'll need for your cloud labs. So in this example, I clicked on the AWS free tier. You can see some information about that free tier. You can see the type of offers for the free tiers. The one we care about is the always free tier. That's all you'll need. And if you scroll down, you can see all the different services and what you can do with them with the free tier, which is enough to even launch your own business based on the always free tier almost. So once you click on that create free account, that's all you really need to get started. Just enter in your email address information and go from there. So I switched over to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Same thing. You could try OCI for free. Click on that button. There it is. There's an Oracle Cloud free tier, just like the AWS. And here's the different free tiers you can try. Pay as you go.
And again, there's that always free services tier you can use to build out your services. More than enough. Let's scroll down. You can once again see all the services OCI provides that you can use the free tier. Going to the networking section specifically, you can see the always free symbol. So I can build all of these different network constructs out all for free. Okay. And just like AWS, if I click the start for free, all you have to do is really enter in some account information and away you go. Okay, in this lesson, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure will be my cloud provider of choice for this demo. So I'm going to just demonstrate how quickly you can build out some essentially cloud network architecture, some cloud labs, and just some quick ideas just right through the console. So at the moment, I'm creating a new virtual cloud network with the IPv4 CIDR block 10/16. And the goal here is for me to connect two VCNs together just to get it to work. So I create a VCN A. I'm going to create another VCN, virtual cloud network, call this VCN B with a different IPv4 CIDR block. Very important that your networks do not overlap with their network ranges. Okay, VCN A, VCN B, just like that. I have two different networks. Okay, now let's go back into VCNA and let's go ahead and create a subnet just to see what that looks like. And create a subnet, give it a name of maybe the subnet A. Why not? Some things you'll need to learn, especially based on the cloud provider, subnet types and the specifics. This one's called a regional, meaning it spans across multiple availability domains, aka data centers. You also have like stuff like DNS, security lists, can make the subnet public or private. These are all the things you'll need to drill down to the weeds. And this is where the certifications will be very helpful to just iron out all those little details. So I created that subnet. While I'm in here, I'm going to begin creating my gateway so I can peer the two VCNs together. In this case, I'm going to go down to local peering gateways, give it a name of two VCNB. These gateways in this example are used specifically to peer and connect VCNs together. One-on-one peering, it's not peered yet, so I'll have to go back to, let's see, subnet is ready. Yep, subnet's ready. If my CIDR block are carved out, we'll do the same thing in VCNB. Notice I'm going pretty fast through this just because I have an expectation that you did the work before in the prior lessons to get a very thorough understanding of just networking and cloud networking in general, what that looks like. So this should all be familiar to you by now. All right, so subnet B, let's create another subnet, regional IPv4 CIDR block. Make that public subnet, DNS selected, security list. You can play with all those things. I'm just gonna go ahead and create the subnet. And then you'll want to create another gateway for this. So each VCN has their own local peering gateway. So I'll create the local peering gateway here, and then we'll kind of see the magic right after this. All right, so all right, I have my two gateways in both VCNs. Now I can actually establish the peering across them. So with OCI, you have the ability to just essentially go and select the other VCN if it's in the same region. And there it is. It's unpeered. There's available VCN I can peer to. And just like that, uh, the peering has started pending. We'll give it, 30 seconds or so. Subnet's created. Let's go back down, see if it's about ready. Pending. All right, cool. And it's peered. So one final thing to note is most times cloud providers have additional network tools you can look at to get a sense of what you have built out. So in OCI, you have something called Network Visualizer, which is pretty neat. It gives you a map of all your network resources in the region. After a few seconds here, it should populate with the VCNs I created, and there we go. You can see at a high level that VCN A, VCN B is this. I can move that around, click on it, but they're paired together, and now I'm ready to deploy resources and test connectivity across them if I want it. All right, in this lesson, I'm going to quickly explore some practical and common scenarios that you'll encounter in the real world and something that will be useful just to add to your own project portfolio that we'll discuss in the later sections. One scenario that you'll for sure come across is that three-tier architecture. And this is something you can provision right within any of your cloud providers that you choose. This is going to consist of a single virtual network. It can be public or private. I recommend kind of playing with that and understanding why you would make some of those virtual networks completely public or private. Within that virtual network, I want you to create a web subnet, a app subnet, and a database subnet, and the appropriate security groups and routing to control access between those different subnets. And think of these subnets, these are your tiers. So like the web subnet, public, and that's usually where you also place like your public facing load balancers to balance your backends. You kind of play around with that. Maybe you don't call it web. Maybe you can just call it your front end subnet or something like that. But it should all make sense to you. But the goal is to allow external clients to access your resources in a secure manner. So they access that first top layer tier, web or load balancer subnet, what have you. And then from there, the middle tiers where your application or web service will actually sit. We want to have these in private subnets, meaning that they're only accessible from within that private network, whether that's the other subnets or cloud, or maybe you even get creative and only allow specific resources between those subnets to talk to that subnet, those resources in that subnet. And then the last tier will be your database subnet. So this is typically the most important subnet you want to secure out of those three when it comes to the three tier. You want to keep your data very secure. So really think about that when you're going through your design. But at the end of the day, you want to build out this three tier. And I recommend deploying some resources in there. What would you deploy in those subnets? Play around with those, especially the load balancer. And I also recommend playing around with setting up a open source web service, because this will kind of teach you things on what to expect when you're deploying resources on a load balancer, what that looks like. And it'll step you through things that you will for sure encounter in the real world as well, such as certain services not working or the HTTPS port isn't listening on 443 on that back end. You have to figure out why. The database, I don't, you don't have to learn about anything that's truly database related, like SQL queries, or even really deploy database. But if you can figure out a way to put something in that back end, that would be really helpful. They'll again give you some further detail on what to expect in the real world. That's scenario number one. It's very straightforward. You could probably deploy, honestly, all of this within the virtual network, subnets, et cetera. That should be able to get done within an hour. Not saying that it will all work, but as far as deploying it, shouldn't take too long. It's everything else. Those resources will take a while. That's a good one to go through. The second scenario is this is more intense. Like I mentioned in the earlier lessons, you can really sign up for all the major providers. They're always free tier. And in this scenario, I recommend signing up to two, so maybe like AWS and OCI, like I mentioned, and going through and seeing if you can establish a VPN connection between the two cloud providers. And there's a couple of ways to do it. I recommend for sure seeing if you can get those two cloud networks. So one cloud network and one cloud provider and another cloud network built in another cloud provider. In this case, AWS and OCI, see if you can use the cloud native VPN services to set up a VPN connection between the two, because you definitely can. And then once you have that set up, you really want to test to make sure it works. So try to get traffic across it. This scenario really combines a lot of parts. One thing, it speaks to the multi-cloud architecture of things, the way things are going, but it's also delving into some of the more critical aspects. So setting up private connectivity between the different endpoints and sending traffic across. So this one will most likely take some time because if you've never set up an IPsec VPN tunnel, there's some steps to go through, and each cloud provider will have their documentation on how to do it and how to even set up with some other cloud providers. Like for sure, OCI has documentation on how to set up a VPN cloud natively to AWS. So definitely go through that and get that working. Scenario three, this is something you don't have to spend a whole lot of time on, but to see if you can play with Terraform. It's again, I mentioned earlier, it's not really something that's a hard requirement to be very crafted, skilled with like automation tools and the DevOps side of things. But Terraform is something that you will encounter at some point because being in the cloud is not only virtual, but it's essentially just like an API underneath the hood and programmatic. So you can build all these resources. You can build it all out without ever even logging inside it in the console screen. Just getting a general sense of how to use Terraform and deploy it is very useful. There's a lot of labs and documentation out there right from the cloud providers. And I would do something very simple, maybe just try to deploy a virtual network with a couple of subnets. So it's just good to kind of see what that looks like. Okay, the last scenario, just thinking of scenario ideas, things you'll come into in the real world will be leading a cloud migration from on-prem to the cloud. So this will be probably a more phased approach. So in this example, you probably don't really have a true just build it and you're done type approach. You'll want to probably simulate and pretend you're lifting an app or moving a local VM to the cloud. How would you do that? What would you configure to allow that migration to happen? How would you know it's successful? How would you fail over from where the VM is sitting in one location to another? So this is a more interesting one. There's a lot of ways to slice it, but see if you can do that. See if you can take something like a VM image from somewhere or anything really, and see if you can migrate it successfully to the cloud and what, if any, downtime happens. So a lot of times you'll be messing with either load balancers or DNS or some type of failover timings, things like that to make it successful. So scenario four is kind of up to you how you want to slice it, but we can get used to what that process looks like because you'll work on a lot of migration projects to the cloud that's based on this exactly in a few different ways. So this is a good one to get under your belt. All right. So as you go along, I definitely recommend documenting each of these scenarios and just reminding yourselves that it's not about perfection. It's just really focused on getting the core details in your brain and learned and understanding what to look for as far as it comes to design and troubleshooting. Again, I invite you to use these ideas later on when you start to build out your portfolio and your resume, or you can add it to part of your interview prep. But all these labs you're doing, they're definitely not a waste of time. It'll help give you a full sense how powerful the cloud is when it comes to building out these network infrastructures and what you can do and how quick you can do it. In this lesson, I'm going to give you some resume and LinkedIn optimization tips, mostly around branding and why that matters for your career. I'm going to demo what my resume and cloud portfolio and social media LinkedIn account looks like as of today. Hopefully, this will give you some ideas on what you should be thinking about as you create your branding. And then starting at a high level, looking at this website here, SeanMooreResume.com, that's my own personal website that I control. And this is essentially a version of my resume from a resume creator that helped me build out a professional resume. As you see, you can go and type this website name in and it goes right directly to my resume page. And it gives you a clear, not only description of my career goals and education experience and certifications, but at a high level, it shows that I am at least somewhat tech savvy just by having my own personal website. So as far as branding, for me personally, I use this as kind of my catch-all. This is kind of like the center of my brand online at least. So notice that within this resume, top right, it has some links that will direct you to some other website as well, not owned by me, but if we kind of click through those, it will be sent to, for example, my LinkedIn website. So this also, and a good start really, if you're just getting started with building out your brand LinkedIn is a very popular website. I'm sure you're probably aware of by now, for your career goals, and it kind of outlines very similar information as my resume website, but obviously a bit more real time. But something to note outside of just the career and accolades down here, I think at the bottom. So the other things to note is that essentially I have links in all these different websites that kind of redirect you to all my different personal brands. So I have like a link that will direct you to my GitHub page, right from my LinkedIn and from my personal website. In this LinkedIn profile, you can actually get redirected right to some Oracle blogs that I post publicly of my current job role. But from there, I also have, if I go back to my website for my resume, you see I have a GitHub account as well. So your GitHub account, I recommend looking at this. Yeah, it's a bit DevOps like, but in here you can really control and build out some proper tools for networking and what I mentioned earlier about building out a Terraform template. You can store that here and kind of show that you're a bit more well-rounded than just your typical network engineer would have. You have a little bit of experience, or at least some high level understanding of automation and code. I have a lot of repos just from over the years of building stuff and trying things out. Like for my resume, for example, it's actually completely serverless, and it's built all in AWS, and that's something you can showcase. And I'll show you how you can do the same. It's a pretty cool cloud resume challenge you'll see in a second, where you can go through and you'll learn all these different concepts. And at the end, you'll have your own personal website and GitHub page where you can push out changes to your resume through your repo whenever you need to make updates to it. From there, I have some other things too that I built out from just over the years. Many years ago, back when this was more popular, I had my own blog. It still exists, Google's Blogspot, but this also links back from not only my resume page, but also LinkedIn. You can see how these all kind of flow and tie into each other. So you can go to any one of these websites and you can get to the other, but you can see how far back it goes, 2009, where I was just building content and building blogs and things just to showcase my skill set. If you're just now joining kind of or starting your career, you're not expected to have these many years of experience to go back, but just having these pieces out there, like think of these as chess pieces on your chessboard, just having all of this out there will be very beneficial to you, and also shows to your future employer that you're committed to what it is you're trying to obtain, as far as being a cloud network engineer or architect, and that you are dedicating time outside of just whatever job you have today to get there. So I mentioned that with a resume website that I have, that through this is called the Cloud Resume Challenge. You can check it out yourself, cloudresumechallenge.dev. And this is a very cool way to really jumpstart the cloud side of things as well. So outside of the IT certs, or in lieu of the IT certs, this challenge is pretty cool because it really kind of covers and brushes over a lot of the things that are what's great about the cloud and the cool things you can do in the cloud, and it will get you very hands-on and a lot of the aspects outside of just the networking side of things. So I recommend at least two things. So first, focus on creating those cloud labs with the always free tier that I mentioned in the last couple of lessons. Definitely get those free cloud pages up and running. Sign up for those. No reason not to. And then second, come here and take a look at this cloud resume challenge, because by the time you go through the book, you'll have something useful, and at the end, you'll have something like this for you to showcase exactly. So this will tie in nicely with any other skill sets you may have. Like if you're already a network engineer, will tie in very nicely with that. So check that out. I think it's pretty low cost for the actual challenge. I mean, it's been some years since I really looked at this, but I highly recommend this as well. The last thing I really want to call out is that for your resume itself, I don't have my exact resume shown here. I did go through a professional resume writer, and I still recommend this today, even with the advent of AI. The things a professional resume writer can do for you will pay itself back tenfold. So this is the person I worked with at I think Scientech Resumes. She does quite a few things besides writing professional resumes, but she can also help you with job search report or even with a one-on-one interviewing prep. So That's something that I ask for help with. So, as you go through your career, you'll learn that there will always be others you ask for help, no matter how far along you are. So, whether it's direct mentors or coaches, or just finding a third party that can help with things that's kind of outside your skill set, or you haven't really crossed through that wall or barrier, definitely reach out and find that person that can help you do that, or team. Obviously, this isn't a free service. It does cost some money, but again, the payback is tenfold, and you will stand above the crowd very easily. And that's what this is all about, really, is standing above the crowd. That's how you're going to get through to not only being called up for those interviews, but landing that offer that you want, not just any offer, but a great offer. So, in the lesson here, essentially you have the web links here. I'll try to add this to the content session so you can kind of just go through it and have a template to go from. But this is really your whole brand, your own portfolio. There's probably some other things you can do as well, but this will accomplish a lot more than what other people have done. As I mentioned, if you have all these different portfolio sites and GitHub, all that set up, you will stand above the crowd for sure. In this lesson, we'll touch on how to bring trust during your job search, even if you don't have those 10 years of experience or what have you as a network engineer, especially not a cloud network engineer. And really, it'll come down to really promoting how your resume and how your LinkedIn profile and how your brand portfolio all aligns towards that one goal, becoming a cloud network engineer. So that means you'll touch on things such as all of the certifications, all the labs you build, essentially that hopefully you took that resume challenge, how you built your own serverless website for your resume, and how that all bridges all those gaps that could be touched upon if employers do kind of harp on about your years of experience or not having that. Showing that you have not only the wherewithal to go through the process of building all those different portfolios, but showing excitement and passion about this career field and all these different aspects, technology that's available in the cloud. Also recognize that many times employers will hire based on potential or your mindset, not just what skill sets you have today. A lot of things you can build upon once you're in that particular job role. And if the employer can recognize that, can be that one little win that gets you through the door. I recommend joining any communities that are out there. There's LinkedIn groups, there's Discord groups, forums that used to be a thing, not so much anymore. Some social media platforms like Facebook and Reddit usually have groups as well around networking for sure, and cloud. I recommend joining those, participating, and letting those people know what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go. That'll make the difference between or applying to a job without the experience, with nothing to really show for it, versus showing up and having this portfolio you can talk about and talk upon. All right, and that's really it. So in the next lessons, we'll be wrapping up and kind of covering really the final plans and ideas to really make sure that you're focused on not only the job search and applying, but the interviewing and setting really just goals for yourself so you can really grab that position, your dream job of a cloud network engineer or cloud network architect. In this lesson, we'll walk through the career milestones template, which is a tool designed to help you visualize, plan, and track your progress from beginner to being hired. Now, these milestones will break your journey into smaller, achievable steps and help you stay motivated and focused along the way. They're broken down in sections, not too many sections, just a handful. We're going to start from the foundation, so the foundational knowledge. So, the first milestones that I expect you to get completed is really just getting an overview of networking concepts and going through some of the Network Plus and CCNA study material if you haven't done that, just to get a feel for it and starting to understand the terms when it comes to computer networking. You could probably skip all this if you plan on doing a cert anyways, but this is where I want you to start. Just dive right into getting that technical foundational knowledge up. Along with that, make sure you complete section 2 of this course if you haven't already. Probably did, but this is an easy one to knock out just to make sure you understand what this role is as a cloud network engineer or cloud network architect. And lastly, you create those cloud accounts for those free tiers. I mean, this is stuff that you can do inside of 5 minutes, maybe 10 for each cloud provider. So I recommend opening at least two different cloud accounts, between AWS, Azure, OCI, or GCP. And that way, when you go through like some of your network architectures, which we'll discuss in a second, you'll be ready to go. After that, I want you to dive into into the lab experience we talked about. So go out and create those network constructs within your cloud environment just to get a feel for them. Try to get connectivity to work with some of these as well. Like for load balancers, can you deploy a load balancer, place a web server behind it, and connect to it over the internet? Now, that's something that will kind of teach you all the different layers of a network as you go along. So that's a good one. And also go through and build out the network architectures, at least a few that we talked about along the way. The common ones you'll see, like the 3-tier architecture, the hub and spoke virtual network, and the multi-cloud architecture. That's why I recommend having multiple cloud accounts for this reason alone. And with those multi-cloud architectures, see if you can set up a VPN across those two regions and get connectivity to work there as well. Because if you get this far with it, really you have built out one of the more complicated cloud network architecture structures that you'll come across. With that, document and share your lab projects along the way, whether that's just a LinkedIn post about what you did and how you did it, or your own blog site. This will be very useful for not only yourself, but for others to be aware of what you're doing and to help build out that portfolio. All right. Along with that, you're going to spend a good portion of your time, honestly, in the certs portion, which I recommend at least knocking out one to all of these if you don't have any already. This lays all the groundwork and everything you need to essentially be an expert when it comes to being a cloud network engineer by the time you get to the end. So if you don't have that foundational network cert, network plus, or CCNA, start there. I will say the CCNA is definitely a bit tougher, and you might actually need, probably not nowadays, but you probably need some Cisco gear. I think Cisco has a lot of virtual lab stuff you can use nowadays. But the CCNA will go above and beyond what you need to learn. It's a general network engineer knowledge that you'll need along the way. I do recommend to get at least a foundational cloud cert. These can be knocked out pretty easy, especially compared to a CCNA. But this will start to get your mind around what the world of cloud is like and all the things you'll need to know, because the cloud infrastructure, cloud environments isn't just the network design and architecture. The network is there to support all the different types of resources and the infrastructure projects that you will come across in the cloud. So I recommend at least a foundational cert. The cloud vendors will offer these for fairly cheap or free compared to the other certs. So this is a good one to knock out as well. All right. So the net cert is a game changer, in my personal opinion, one of the game changers. And that is to pass a solutions architect associate exam from like AWS is what I recommend, or any of the other major cloud providers. So this really gets you deep into the weeds of a cloud architect, cloud engineer, not specifically networking, but just the overall concepts that you'll come across along the way in your career. No matter if you're working alongside someone that is the cloud architect or you're taking on some of that responsibility, this will essentially give you a good blueprint of most of the things you'll need to learn about within a cloud environment. And then finally, again, this is another game changer. And as I mentioned in earlier lessons, it is difficult. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but if you can work through and try to at least attempt to take the AWS Network Advanced Specialty Cert or equivalent at another cloud provider, this is truly a game changer, because if you can get through this, you will be far and above ahead of everyone else without this cert as far as knowledge when it comes to cloud networking. The things that this cert teaches is well beyond what the average Joe will typically know about cloud networking and how to connect things. So this is a good one, because it teaches you not just the design side of things about all those common cloud network constructs, but how do you use all these things together, the different scenarios, the things you would need to troubleshoot or know about, the nuances between these different type of cloud network constructs that are out there. That's very important. Then lastly, it's optional, but looking to picking up like a Terraform or Social Exam or something of the type, I would say you could probably get away with reading a book or just going online and labbing this up. It's probably more than enough for what you'll need as a cloud network engineer and architect. But again, it's good to know about at least some automation and DevOps as you step into this role. And lastly, and I think this ties everything together, complete the cloud resume challenge that I talked about earlier. See the link there, you'll have that also. A resume at the end, a completely serverless in the cloud of your choice, but also something to really add to your portfolio when you go into interviews and talk to employers. You can show this off and say, hey, I built this all on my own, completely serverless, it's in the cloud. By the way, I'm certified as a network specialist in AWS. I have a CCNA and all these things, and it really ties everything together here. So knocking all of these certs, or at least two out of the list here, will make a big difference when you go into these interviews. And this will be really all the technical stuff you'll need to know. You get through all of these, all six of these milestones, and I would say that's about it as far as needing to gather up and learning knowledge before you step into this role. From there, everything else is really more career focused from there. So that's sessions after that, as you go through the milestones, will be going through and getting that resume in your LinkedIn site. If you have one tied up, I recommend to have a LinkedIn site, at least for your portfolio and to show off, all the things you've done. So I mentioned in the other lessons that I recommend working with a professional resume writer. A lot of times they can help with not only your resume, but interview prep and getting your LinkedIn branding just right. And along with that, consider opening up a GitHub profile as well to show off those projects you'll be creating that I mentioned earlier in this lesson. So I didn't talk on this in other lessons, but you'll want to start applying to relevant roles, and it can be tough because you may not hear feedback, but just to at least get a general idea on what employers are looking for. Go through the checklists of the job role, the job requirements, what they expect. And if you feel like you can at least start to fill out some of those, start applying. Don't feel shy to do it. I recommend starting on this as early as possible as well, just to get a feel on what's out there. And you never know. Sometimes you'll find a role that maybe isn't completely cloud related, but it's a network engineering role with some cloud aspect to it. I recommend those a lot if this is your first stepping stone into this type of field, because that way you'll be able to really round out the general network engineering job roles, but still have a foot in the door in the world of cloud. So there's a special interview method called STAR stories. This is something you can rehearse and work on. I recommend, again, working with a interview coach on this method, and it goes through the whole process of how to really tell a good story when it comes to answering interview questions and being ready for the questions that will come up a lot. And it kind of ties into the mock interview and coaching sessions as well. From there, it's really mindset and consistency. So these are kind of more vague. You can kind of check them off as you feel like you're making progress. Create a schedule. Create something that, even if it's only 30 minutes a day in the mornings or afternoons, that you can create a consistent habit. That's honestly the biggest difference from pushing forward towards a goal or not really breaking through at all. Being consistent makes a huge difference. To creating a tracker, I have a lot of trackers in this course I recommend using where you can. Helps you keep you focused and really on the right path forward to get to this role. It's definitely possible, but it will take effort and it will take a focused approach to get there. So yeah, keep a consistent schedule and track that as you go. Along the way, you celebrate those milestones, especially when it comes like those certs, or if you finally get called in for an interview. Celebrate those small wins or big wins as you go along. That will help a lot with burnout, because this is a lot to take in. It's a lot to do. Hopefully, with any luck, you already have some of these knocked out. Like maybe you already have some of the certs or experience or what have you, or you're already just not in the role and you're trying to fill out some gaps. Either way, complete those milestones and check in with someone that can help you be accountable for your progress as well, whether that's a friend, family members, or a mentor, a coach that you're working with. Make sure you're checking in with someone that can help you stay on task and on track for that goal. All right. And that's it. You get through majority of these, and you should feel confident in your abilities to either land that role or be more than prepared to take on the job as a cloud network engineer or cloud network architect. I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm a big fan of having a task planner for pretty much all of my goals that I have laid out. And that's no different for this lesson. So here I want to quickly show you how you can build your own 30, 60, 90-day plan. I have a template that you can use or you can edit based on your needs. This is a powerful tool inside with your milestone tracker to turn learning into consistent progress and long term momentum. So, by breaking your plan into 30-day blocks, it gives you short term goals and milestones to aim for along the way, which will align again with that milestone checker that you have with you as well now from the previous lesson. With this, it helps you to stay motivated, just like the other task tracker, hopefully, and see your results a lot sooner because now you have days you can put with the outlines with your milestones. In the first 30 days, you'll really be focusing on what I mentioned earlier about the foundational knowledge, hopefully completing your first labs, starting to get your resume and LinkedIn profiles created. The 30 days will essentially will be getting your bearings and starting to get a consistent schedule going that I mentioned. So, you want to create a weekly study practice schedule, at least 30 minutes a day, if possible, will go a long way. You'll be surprised how much you can accomplish in just 30 minutes a day every week as you go. But the first 30 days is just to get your focus and get aligned with everything you're trying to accomplish. From there, the next 30 days, so day 31 to day 60, you will be for sure spending a lot of time with your labs, documenting that. You can even start applying to some roles if you see any out there that makes sense, junior level roles. If that comes across, you want to start rehearsing those stories I mentioned earlier for your interviews and continue sharing your progress along the way because employers will see this that you're actively working towards this particular job role that you're looking for. And also, as you go through this, start asking feedback on your resume, or if you do a mock interview, start getting feedback from that. You should be getting that back from your mentor coach, or if you're working with the interview coach or professional resume writer that I mentioned earlier, you should be getting a lot of that feedback right away from all these levels. So the 60 days is really you start to build a lot of momentum in this area here. And really, the final 30 days and onward, I call it day 61 to 90 plus, you should start to see some results, hopefully back from having your resume professionally designed and ready to go, your LinkedIn profile done. I would say by day 90, you should at least have one foundational cert completed, whether that is the Network Plus or the Cloud Foundational cert. I won't say the CC name because that is its own animal in a way. But at this point, anything that's 90 plus is all the hard entrenched stuff, mostly related to certifications that you'll be working on. And some of those cloud labs, like the resume challenge, that will take some time. That'll take some doing. And what you want to do is while you're going through and you're starting up and you're building labs, you want to still be applying to these jobs as you level up those skills along the way. So it's a kind of a multitask, multi-pronged approach. You don't feel like you only work on one thing at a time and then wait for that to get done to move on to the next. You want to kind of spend time with all of these, a lot of these, as much as you can. It can be overwhelming, as you can see, trying to work on 6 to 7 things at a time outside of whatever you're doing now. I'm sure you have some job. You also have to deal with family. Downtime is also important, but try to pick 1 or 2 or 3 a day to kind of work on. Again, a lot of it will honestly be some of these certs that you'll be prepping for. That will take a bulk of it. But as you wind down on certs, you really want to start to lock in on getting that resume completed. It should definitely be done by now, and getting those applications out. At this time, you want to not really just have a shotgun approach. Yes, a little bit, but you really want to focus on jobs that make sense and that aligns closely to all the things you've learned and this experience you have and where you're at in your career. So this refine and acceleration is the hard part, and you'll honestly spend most of your time here, but this is where all the results come to fruition.
Hey, welcome to the final lesson of the course. So I want to say congrats and thank you for listening to me and going through this process with me, going through the journey. It's a lot of work, but you did it. You made it to the end. So with that, I want to wrap up with getting to the final goal, which is to obtain that position if you haven't already. In this lesson, we're going to talk about really just when to pivot and when to start applying, and what to do if you're not really getting the results you're looking for. As you start to go through those first certifications and you start getting some of those lab completed and your portfolio started, you really want to start applying right then and there, or at least start getting an idea of what some of those employers are looking for when it comes to positions in this field. And from there, you'll get a sense of whether or not your skill sets meets that criteria or is pretty close or far away in some cases. But at this point, we should be kind of moving from just gaining theory and learning topics to actually applying for roles. And what I've included in this lesson is the Zach application tracker, yet another tracker checklist that I've used for myself when I went through this process or when I do go through this process. And for me, what helped me a lot was finding those perfect, what I consider jobs or places I would want to work. I created what's called a top 50 employer list, and you'll see this document. You can feel free to change this to whatever you like or add to it. You'll have a copy of it. I went from 1 to 50 and just noted all the potential companies I would like to work for from start to finish, top to bottom. And from there, I essentially just went to those 50 specific companies. So instead of doing like just a shotgun approach and finding any employer out there with the open job role, I found the places I wanted to work and I focused only on those 50. And this worked very well for me for focusing and really fine tuning the exact type of job I was looking for at the right place. So that's very important. You can't always pick the employer, obviously, or even the team you're going to work for, but I found that this helped me a lot and helped me ensure that my expectations would most likely align with what I'm looking for and what I plan to achieve. So the list is included, and I recommend to start going through there as you go through this journey. Work on those certifications, work on your portfolio, work on your resume, get all those things in order, but apply along the way. Don't feel like this is a step by step. You have to do step one before you can do step two. We want to do a few things in parallel to make progress quickly. So I found this very helpful for me personally. Okay, so along with that, when it comes to pivoting, so you're going through, you're applying, maybe you're not getting the results you want. At this time, this is where you want to, if you haven't already, try to find a mentor or someone you can bounce ideas off of. I will say that I'm available as well. My time is limited because, as I mentioned at the start of this course, I am a fully fledged cloud network architect myself, and my schedule is usually pretty busy, but I'm offering essentially a free one-on-one session for you. And I'll include a checklist of what I expect you to at least have prepared before we have that call. But I'm going to open this up to you to work directly with me if I think it will be a good fit. No cost for that first session. And if you think it's something that makes sense for you, we can talk out a plan that makes sense for you, a roadmap, if you will, where you and I can work one-on-one. So those slots will be very limited to a select few at a time, depending on needs and my availability. But that is something I'm going to offer to everyone that goes through this course. So yeah, check out that checklist. And really, I just want to say good luck. You can do this. If I could do it, you can definitely do it. And I look forward to hearing about your journey. So thanks again and congrats.